The sky over the Wyoming mountains had turned the color of bruised steel when Dawson heard the scream. Short. Strangled. Then, nothing. He froze mid-step, hand resting on the rifle slung over his back, breath caught halfway. This part of the forest didn't get visitors, not without reason. His boots sank into the pine-laced mud as he followed the sound, heart pounding harder with each silent second that passed. He found her near a slope where the trail gave way to a steep drop. She was crumpled in the dirt, one leg twisted under her. Her skin was scraped raw, her tank top torn and clinging to her like a second skin. Mud streaked down her face, mixing with sweat and something close to panic. Her eyes found his, sharp, wide, and filled with the kind of fear that had nothing to do with a broken ankle. "Help!" she breathed, voice cracked and trembling. Dawson crouched beside her, his touch careful but firm. "Don't move," he said, low and steady. "You're hurt bad." She didn't argue. When he lifted her into his arms, she clung to him like he was the last solid thing left on earth. The rain had started to fall by the time he carried her into the clearing that led to his cabin, a silent, weathered shelter tucked beneath the trees. He didn't speak until she was lying on the worn leather couch, a wool blanket draped over her trembling body. He wrapped her ankle with the quiet skill of someone who'd done it too many times for others. She watched him like a stray animal, ready to bolt, but too broken to move. "You got a name?" he asked eventually, not looking up. She hesitated. "Wren," she whispered. "Just Wren." "All right," he replied, eyes finally meeting hers. "I'm Dawson." Outside, thunder cracked, but inside, the only sound was the fire sputtering to life in the hearth. Wren shifted, wincing with every movement. "You always live out here alone?" she asked. "Yeah," Dawson answered. "People make noise. Out here, I can hear myself think." Wren stared at him for a long moment. There was something buried in his voice. Grief, maybe. Or something even deeper. She wasn't sure if it scared her, or made her feel less alone. She didn't tell him why she'd come out here. That she'd left behind a life dripping with money, control, and expectations. That her last name would make headlines if she vanished. But she looked at Dawson, at the way he carried silence like armor, and something cracked open inside her. He had saved her without asking who she was. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that from this moment on, neither of their lives would ever be the same again. Dawson sat by the fire long after Wren had drifted into a restless sleep. The storm outside had eased, but inside the cabin, something had shifted, something silent and heavy. He stared into the flames, jaw tight, chest full of thoughts he hadn't spoken in years. There was something about her that felt familiar. Not her face, but the way she looked when she thought no one was watching. Like someone who had learned the hard way how to survive in silence. Wren hadn't told him everything. That much he knew. Her eyes gave her away. They were too alert, too cautious, like someone used to scanning a room for exits. Dawson had seen that look before, in the mirror, after his brother's funeral, after the farm went under. People didn't just stumble into the middle of nowhere unless they were running from something big. And whatever Wren had left behind, it wasn't finished with her yet. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the fog still clung to the trees like ghosts. Wren sat up slowly, ankle throbbing, head pounding with a weight that went deeper than the physical pain. Dawson had already been up for hours, chopping wood, fixing the busted radio, pretending like nothing about this situation stirred the stillness he'd built around himself. When she looked at him, she saw someone solid. Quiet. But she didn't trust quiet men anymore. Quiet men had a way of hiding things loud men never could. "I should leave," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't used it in weeks. Dawson didn't look at her when he replied, just stacked another log by the hearth. "You can't even stand." "I'll crawl if I have to." He finally turned. Why are you in such a hurry to disappear? Wren looked away. The weight of her last name, Bennett, felt like a chain around her throat. If he knew who she was, what she'd walked away from, he might see her differently. Worse, he might see her exactly the same way everyone else had, a spoiled rich girl running from her own mess. She didn't want that. Not from him. "Because I don't belong here," she whispered. "Because people like me don't get rescued. We get exposed." Dawson didn't speak. Not right away. But something in his expression cracked, just slightly. And in that small shift, Wren saw it again. He wasn't just hiding her from the world. He was hiding from it too. Maybe not from fame or wealth, but from grief. From guilt. From love. And though neither of them said it out loud, the cabin had already become more than shelter. It was a line drawn in the dirt between the people they were before and whatever they were about to become. Wren didn't sleep that night. She lay still on the couch, eyes fixed on the wooden beams above her, listening to Dawson's footsteps outside. He'd said he needed air, but she knew better. People didn't walk into the dark just to breathe. They walked into it when they couldn't stand what was inside. Something about him made her chest tighten in ways she couldn't name. He was kind, yes, but there was pain under his kindness. The kind that doesn't speak unless it's forced to. She thought about the last 48 hours. The mountain road. Her phone, tossed into a creek. The car left behind. The envelope of cash in her backpack, now hidden beneath a stack of firewood. Everything about this escape had been impulsive, reckless, even. But as she watched the flames flicker in the fireplace, she knew something with chilling clarity. This place had saved her. And she didn't think she could leave it yet. Or him. Dawson came back just before dawn. His shoulders were damp from fog, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak, just poured himself coffee and sat across from her like nothing had happened. Wren broke the silence first. "You always this quiet with strangers?" He sipped from his mug, not smiling. "You're not a stranger anymore." Her breath caught in her throat. It was just a sentence. Simple. But it hit something soft in her that hadn't been touched in a long time. They spent the morning in slow, careful rhythm. Dawson helped her wash up, brought her food without asking what she liked. She watched the way he moved, measured, precise, like he was always 2 steps ahead of something chasing him. She wanted to ask what had broken him, but she also didn't want to ruin the fragile space that had formed between them. So instead, she told him something true. "My real name is Wren Bennett," she said. His eyes flicked to hers, a twitch in his jaw. She waited for judgment, for recognition. But all he said was, "I figured." "You knew?" she whispered. "You're on every news station in the state. Rich girl runs from wedding, leaves fiancé at the altar, vanishes without a trace. Didn't take long to connect the dots." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I've been trying to disappear too," he said. "And I know how much it hurts when someone finds you." And with that, the air between them changed. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a confession offered in the dark, met with understanding instead of punishment. And in that quiet, flickering cabin, Wren realized something terrifying. She didn't want to be found by the world. She wanted to be seen by him. Dawson didn't say much after her confession. He just nodded once, slow, like the truth hadn't surprised him, but had settled into his bones all the same. Wren tried to pretend the moment hadn't shifted something between them, but it had. She felt it in the way his eyes lingered a little longer when he looked at her, in the way he paused before answering her, as if measuring how much of himself he was willing to let out now that she'd peeled back her own mask. Later that afternoon, she found him out back, chopping wood with a kind of quiet violence. Each swing was precise, but there was something underneath it, like each piece of wood was standing in for something else. Or someone. She watched from the porch, her ankles still wrapped tight, her heart even tighter. "Who did you lose?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was soft, but the question landed like a hammer. He stopped mid-swing, didn't turn around, just stared at the log in front of him, breathing heavy. "My brother," he said. 5 years ago. Car crash. He was drunk. I was supposed to drive that night." Wren didn't move, didn't speak. The weight in his words settled around them like fog, thick and unshakable. Dawson finally lowered the axe, turning just enough for her to see the cracks in his carefully built armor. "After that, I left everything. Parents couldn't look at me. I couldn't look at myself. Bought this land. Started building fences and silence." He laughed once, bitter. "Turns out grief is louder in the quiet." She walked to him, slow, careful, every step hurting her more emotionally than physically. When she reached him, she didn't speak, just placed her hand gently on his arm. His skin was warm, but his body tensed under her touch like he wasn't used to being held without needing to earn it. For a long moment, they stood there, surrounded by the endless trees and the ghosts neither of them could quite shake. And in that stillness, something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Of broken things. Of people trying to rebuild with pieces that didn't quite fit anymore. Back inside, the cabin felt different. Not bigger, not smaller. Just more real. Wren sat at the window, staring out at the horizon. "What if the world finds me again?" she asked quietly. Dawson didn't answer right away. Then, from the kitchen, his voice, "Then I guess we'll find out what kind of man I really am." The words weren't poetic, but they mattered more than poetry. Because for the first time, she wasn't the only one running. And for the first time since she'd left everything behind, Wren felt something unfamiliar and dangerous blooming in her chest, the slow, terrifying beginning of trust. The sound of tires on gravel shattered the stillness like a gunshot. Wren froze mid-step near the window, her breath catching in her chest. Dawson looked up from the table, already rising, his body alert. "No one comes up here," he said under his breath, voice low and tight. Wren's pulse pounded in her ears. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. She limped toward the window, heart sinking as a black SUV crawled up the narrow trail leading to the cabin. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone who had been looking for her. Dawson stepped outside before she could stop him. The wind had picked up, kicking dust and leaves around his boots. The vehicle came to a stop, engine idling. The driver's door opened slowly. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, tall, clean-shaven, with the kind of face that didn't blink often. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "A woman. Name's Wren Bennett." Dawson didn't flinch. "No one here by that name." The man smiled like someone used to getting what he wanted. "You sure?" Dawson's jaw tightened. "You're trespassing." Inside the cabin, Wren pressed her hand against her mouth. She recognized the man, Victor Langford, her father's lawyer. He wasn't just here to find her. He was here to bring her back. Quietly. Discreetly. No headlines. No mess. Just another problem solved behind a closed door. Her hands trembled. She had no choice now. If she didn't leave with Victor, there'd be consequences. Not legal ones. Emotional ones. Her family had a way of erasing people without anyone noticing. When Dawson came back inside, his face was pale but calm. "He's not staying," he said. Wren shook her head. "He won't give up. They'll send others. My father. He doesn't like when things go off script." Dawson leaned against the door, arms crossed. "Then maybe it's time you stopped running." The words hit her like a slap. "I didn't run because I was scared. I ran because I couldn't breathe anymore. You have no idea what it's like to be a prisoner in your own name." Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything she'd kept locked away. Dawson's expression shifted. "You're right. I don't know what it's like to be you. But I know what it's like to live with regret. And if you leave now, without choosing for yourself, you'll carry that weight for the rest of your life." Wren stared at him, her chest rising and falling with a fury she didn't know she'd buried so deep. She turned away, but before she could move, he spoke again, softer this time. "You don't owe them anything. But you owe yourself the chance to be free." And just like that, the storm that had been brewing inside her for years finally touched ground. That night, the air inside the cabin felt different. Thicker, restless, like it couldn't decide whether to hold them together or tear them apart. Wren sat by the fireplace, her fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of tea she hadn't touched. Dawson stood by the window, watching the trees like they might move. Neither of them spoke. There was too much to say, and none of it could be undone once it left their mouths. She could still hear Victor's voice in her head, calm and cold. "Come home, Wren. You've made your point." But home had never been home. Not really. "I can't go back," she said finally, barely above a whisper. Dawson didn't turn around. "Then don't." "It's not that simple," she snapped, the heat in her voice catching even her by surprise. "My face is on the news. My family owns half the city. They'll find me, and if they can't, they'll destroy whatever's keeping me hidden." He turned to her slowly, eyes steady. "Let them try." The quiet force in his words made her chest ache. Not because he was trying to protect her, but because, for the first time in her life, someone wasn't trying to control her. He was giving her the space to choose. Wren stood, the pain in her ankle flaring as she walked toward the small table near the front door. She reached under a loose floorboard and pulled out the envelope of cash. Dawson's eyes followed her, but he said nothing. She placed it on the table between them. "This was supposed to get me across the country. Start over. New name. New life. Somewhere quiet." "You think this place is quiet?" he asked, almost smiling. "You showed up, and the whole damn mountain started speaking again." She laughed then, a bitter sound that turned into something more fragile. "You're the first person who's looked at me and didn't see headlines. Or opportunity. Or scandal." Her voice broke. "You just saw me." He stepped closer, slowly, like he didn't want to startle whatever delicate truth was forming between them. "And you saw me," he said, "even when I didn't want to be seen." He reached out, his fingers brushing hers, barely, like asking for permission. She didn't pull away. But before the moment could settle, headlights swept across the cabin walls. A car. Slow. Closer than it should be. Wren's breath caught. Dawson turned sharply, already moving for the rifle by the door. And just like that, the silence shattered, not with words, but with the realization that they had run out of time. The knock came fast, 3 sharp raps against the cabin door. Dawson's grip on the rifle tightened, jaw clenched so hard it ached. Wren stood frozen by the fireplace, her heartbeat thunderous in her ears. This wasn't Victor. Victor didn't knock. He commanded. Whoever was outside, they weren't here to talk. Dawson gave her one look, firm, steady, then motioned for her to move toward the hallway. She didn't argue. Her body acted before her mind could process what was happening. He opened the door slow, the old hinges groaning like they knew this moment was coming. A man stood there, early 40s maybe, rough beard, suit coat too clean for the mud under his boots. "Name's Collins," he said, flashing a badge that looked too polished to be real. "We're looking for a missing woman. Wren Bennett. Seen her?" Dawson didn't blink. "You with the police?" "Private security. Hired by her father." The man smiled. She's not in trouble. Just needs to come home. Place like this, Dawson said coldly. People don't go home unless they want to. From the hallway, Wren could hear every word. Her chest tightened, panic surging, but not just from fear, from rage. This was what they always did. Sent men who smiled while they cornered you. Used protection as a way to control. She gripped the edge of the wall until her knuckles went white. She didn't want to run. Not this time. But she also didn't want Dawson caught in the fallout of her war. I'm gonna ask you once more, Colin said, stepping closer. Is she here? Dawson's eyes darkened. You should leave. The moment stretched, dangerous and still. Collins glanced over Dawson's shoulder, eyes narrowing, and that was all it took. Dawson shoved him back hard, door slamming shut, lock clicking. Go out the back, he called to Wren. Now. But she didn't move. No, she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her limbs. I'm done running. Dawson stared at her, really stared, and in that second, something shifted. He didn't see a runaway socialite. He saw someone who'd been trapped her entire life, finally choosing to fight back. All right, he said, nodding. Then we do this together. Footsteps pounded on the porch. The door shook under a heavy hit. Wren reached into the drawer by the kitchen and pulled out the flare gun Dawson kept for emergencies. Her hands didn't shake. And as the second hit cracked the frame, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Let them come." The door cracked with a sound that didn't belong in a home, like bones snapping. Wren stood still, her finger hovering over the flare gun trigger. Dawson moved like a storm, dragging the heavy table in front of the entrance, bracing it with his body. "Back!" he barked. She didn't listen. Not this time. "They'll break it down," she said, voice shaking. "They won't stop." His eyes met hers. "Then we don't let them win." A boot slammed into the door again, this time splintering the wood. Dawson grabbed the rifle from the corner, cocked it fast, and aimed toward the growing crack. "Don't shoot unless you mean it," Wren warned. He nodded. "Oh, I mean it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then came the voice again, smug and deliberate. "You're making a mistake. You think you're saving her. But people like her don't stay." Wren felt the words slice through her like glass. She'd heard them all her life, from her father, from fiancés, from lawyers in suits. This time, they didn't stick. Without thinking, Wren stepped forward and fired the flare gun through the window. A scream followed, the light blinding, the heat shocking. She didn't aim to hurt, but she wanted them to feel it, that she wasn't just some girl hiding anymore. Dawson stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You really are trouble," he whispered. "I never said I wasn't," she replied, not blinking. The attackers retreated for now, scrambling back to their vehicle. They weren't prepared for resistance, not from a man who'd buried his past, or a woman who finally stopped apologizing for hers. The cabin was a mess, the door barely holding, the windows cracked. But inside, something had solidified. Wren looked at her hands, still trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From fire. "They'll come back," she said, breathing hard. "With more. With worse." Dawson nodded. "Then we keep fighting. Or we run. Together. Your call." Her voice caught in her throat. She had run from a wedding, from cameras, from a life that felt like prison dressed in pearls. But now, for the first time, someone was giving her the choice. Not forcing her. Not trapping her. Just offering. She looked around, at the cracked walls, the ash in the fireplace, the man who stood between her and the rest of the world. She knew this wasn't a fairy tale. It was a battle. But at least now, she wasn't fighting it alone. And in the eerie quiet that followed the chaos, Wren made her choice, not with words, but with a look. One that said, I'm not leaving. Not without you." The cabin smelled of smoke and broken wood. Wren sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, her breathing shallow. The adrenaline had drained from her body, leaving only exhaustion, and something heavier. Dawson moved around in silence, boarding up the shattered window, every nail hammered like punctuation in a sentence they were both too scared to say. For the first time since she arrived, the silence between them felt dangerous, not because of what was outside, but because of what had been stirred inside. "I should have never brought this to your door," she said quietly. Dawson didn't stop working. "You didn't. You could have been killed. So could you?" He looked at her then, eyes tired, jaw clenched, but softer than before. "We both survived. That counts for something." She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe they'd made it through the worst. But deep down, she knew the fight wasn't over. Her family wouldn't stop until she was back in their control. And even if they did, what kind of life could she offer Dawson? She wasn't made for mountains and isolation. And he didn't belong in ballrooms and press headlines. The world outside this cabin would eat them alive. But here, in this broken place, she felt more whole than she ever had in her life. As the evening light faded, Dawson lit the fire and sat across from her. They didn't speak for a long time. The heat from the flames flickered between them, catching shadows on their faces. Finally, he said, "You don't owe me a damn thing. But if you're thinking about leaving—" "I'm not," she cut in. Her voice was hoarse. "I'm just scared." "So am I." His voice cracked for the first time. "But you scare me in a way that makes me feel alive again." That broke something in her. The wall she'd been building, brick by brick, since the day she ran. Tears welled in her eyes, and she let them fall this time. No hiding. No performing. Just raw truth in front of the only person who'd ever looked past her last name. She crawled closer to him, hands trembling, heart wide open. And when he held her, it wasn't like a hero saving a girl. It was two broken people finally allowing themselves to be whole, if only for a moment. Outside, the wind had calmed. No more cars. No more voices. Just the whisper of leaves and the slow, steady rhythm of breathing, together. But deep inside, Wren knew one thing for sure. The real decision hadn't been made yet. And when the sun rose again, the world would be waiting. The morning light came slow, golden through the cracks de janela quebrada. Wren sat at the edge of the bed, Dawson's old flannel wrapped around her shoulders, the weight of the night before still clinging to her skin. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her mind had been filled with a single, simple question. What now? She'd run so far, fought so hard, but running and fighting were different from living. And for the first time, she wanted more than just escape. She wanted peace, the kind that came from staying. Dawson came in from outside, boots dusty, hair damp with morning mist. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at her, really looked. And something in his expression told her he'd made a decision too. He placed an envelope on the table. Wren didn't move. "What is it?" she asked. "A letter," he said. "For your father." Her chest tightened. "You wrote to him?" "No." "You did," he replied. "Whether you send it or not, that's up to you. But I figured it was time you told him who you are now. Not the girl he thinks he owns." Tears welled again, but she didn't hide them. She was done hiding. She walked to the table, picked up the envelope, and stared at her own name written in her handwriting. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a declaration. "I'm not coming back. I'm not yours to control. I am mine now." She looked back at Dawson. "You think he'll understand?" "No," Dawson said simply. "But that's not the point. You don't write letters for them. You write them for you." They didn't talk about what came next. not in detail. But they both knew it wouldn't be easy. The cabin would need fixing. Supplies would run low. And someone, somewhere, would always be looking. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, they weren't surviving, they were living. Together. In their own broken, quiet way. Later that afternoon, Wren stood at the edge of the clearing, wind tugging at her hair, eyes on the dirt road that had once brought her here in fear. She could leave now. Nothing was stopping her. But she turned back toward the cabin, toward him. And when he met her gaze, she smiled. Small, but certain. She walked back without a word. Because she'd already chosen.